Welcome back to Shine In and Out, the space where science meets soul. I'm your host, Sammy Stoltz, and today's episode is for anyone who's ever felt trapped in their own body. If you've stretched, massaged, and medicated to take your pain away only for it to return, you're not broken. You just need to learn the language of your body. And our guest today, Butch Phelps, learned that language the hard way through a devastating car accident, years of pain, and a realization that healing begins not in the muscles, but in the brain. He's the creator of the stretch and release technique, which is a revolutionary approach that retrains both body and nervous system to let go of tension at the source. Together, we'll explore how pain is stored, why so many therapies miss the mark, and how movement can become a form of deep neurological reprogramming. All right, Butch, welcome to Shine In and Out.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you. I'd love to ask about your story, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, it was an interesting story. I got into this around 40 years of age, and I'd been in corporate America up to that point and never really thought about healthcare at all. And so my weight at 37 was about 315 pounds. And I was lucky enough to run into a general practitioner who had studied nutrition. And she taught me how not only to eat to lose weight, but how to eat to maintain the weight. So I wound up losing 105 pounds. And I maintained that weight till 2020 when I did the same thing again and lost another 30. But at the time, at 37, 38, I started working out because I wanted to get myself back into shape. And I developed low back pain and I wound up going to doctors and PTs like most people,
Mm.
and nothing really solved the problem. So I was retiring out of corporate America and I wanted to do something that would give back. Massage therapy caught my eye. And so which was an interesting thing because it was like when I got to the school, they had a rolling enrollment. These are small schools, so they had a rolling enrollment. And the guy said, it might take a couple of weeks before we get you in, get everything approved. And I said, all right. That was on a Wednesday. So the guy calls me on a Friday and he said, you could start Monday if you want. And I'm like, really? So I had to change all my schedules around so I could start. Well, what was interesting about that whole process was that when I walked into that classroom, I had my first teacher taught us about the muscles on a cellular level. It was like I knew things that I didn't know how I knew them, and I could see things, and as I was putting pieces together in my head, things were just falling into place. The people that I needed, they just started showing up in my life. I wound up with 5 mentors. 2 were neurosurgeons, a kinesiologist, a chiropractor, and a physical therapist, and it was like, as I needed stuff and as I needed people, it just came. It was really like a divine intervention, and it was probably the most amazing in fact, it was the most amazing time of my life because I'd never had anything like that happen to me before. And so as I got in with the kinesiologist, he taught me a type of stretch in which he had created called active isolated stretching. And I started to use it. And one day I was in there working on some of his clients, and he said, I noticed you do massage with that. And I said, well, it just seems to make sense that if you soften the muscle, stretching it becomes a little bit easier. And he's like, "Well, I'm not saying anything's wrong with it. I'm just saying I've never seen anyone in 35 years do that." And I was like, "Well, okay, well, that's just what I do." The 2 neurosurgeons who were very influential started talking to me about the brain's role with the muscles itself and how the brain then controls the tension in the muscle. So, in other words, everything you think, feel, and do causes tension in that muscle. That was a piece of information that really triggered what I was doing into something very different from what everybody else was doing. So, my mentor, who was a kinesiologist, he would put a seatbelt around you on a table to stabilize your pelvis as he was stretching. And it being an athlete, I'd always done static stretching most of the time, a little bit of dynamic, but mostly static stretching. That's where you hold it for long periods of time, pull as hard as you can, because the idea is that you're lengthening muscles. When I learned about the brain's connection to the muscles, that's when I saw that we weren't lengthening anything. We were releasing tension. And that tension comes from everything you think, feel, and do. So your state of mind, the thought process, are you frustrated? Are you working on a project? Or could always create that tension in your body. And so as I started to see that and then started incorporating the stretching with it with the massage, I realized that I needed, number one, not to strap anybody to the table because they needed to do this at home and need to do it every day. You think of a
Right.
dog or a cat, they stretch every day, several times a day. And what I found from that was that people are focused on stretching the muscle. And what I realized is with the stretch and release technique, we were stretching the mind. We were getting the mind to let go. And when the mind let go, so did the muscles. And it took off from there. And it's like, as I started working with people and they were like, oh my God, I had this and I had that. In fact, one of my clients, late 60s, she had fibromyalgia. She still does, and had given up tennis and given up snow skiing and so forth. And I got her back to playing tennis 3 and 4 days a week, snow skiing 3 or 4 times a year, and her brother, who was a doctor, he came in from out of town and wanted to meet me. He and I spent, like, 3 hours in front of the muscle chart just talking about muscles and so forth, and he was like, "I've been teaching this stuff all my life," and he said, "No one's ever talked to me about muscles in that way," and that's where things just took off. And
Wow,
so then I
Butch,
wound
that
up
is
writing a
so
book about it. Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I mean, the amount of people that struck me from the beginning that start in corporate America or doing something that, is to pay the bills and is practical. And then when they switch
yeah.
into something like their soul just tells them they need to do something. And it seems like
Yeah.
there was just no question to you that it was like, yeah, I want to do that. And then when you
Yeah.
started, it was easy. It was easier than it should have been. I mean, at that
Yeah.
age to learn all of those anatomical and
Yeah.
physiological things. And then all your
Yeah.
mentors showed up. And I think that is completely a theme with when you're following your purpose, those things just
Yeah.
come. That is so incredible. I also love how you mentioned that tension comes from everything because you are when you're stressed, like, sometimes I have to remind myself, like, "Shoulders down," I don't need to be
Yeah, yes,
clenching.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we gotta be more open and fluid.
See, so many people, they live a life where, you've always heard the thing, the person's living in their head, it's like the saber-toothed tiger is chasing them all the time. So
Mhm.
imagine if a tiger was actually chasing you, how tense your body would be, and if you're doing that 24 hours a day, at some point, you'll either die or damage your body somehow. And it's like by allowing that brain to relax and let go, you stop that race with that tiger.
You're absolutely right, and it goes hand in hand. You can't work just the muscle and you can't work just the mind. So
Right,
I'm very excited to
right.
learn more about your techniques because, like you
Okay.
said, living in fight or flight all the time is not how we were
Yeah.
evolutionarily built. It is not how any
Nope.
species was built. We're supposed to, have a quick burst to get away from a predator and
Yeah.
then go back to homeostasis. So what
Yep.
you're doing is helping us get back there even after a long time because some
Right.
people have been living that way for longer than they realize. So what first helped you realize that pain lives in the brain?
So it was interesting. I started like most people do, and I was focused on the muscles. I mean, keep in mind, I was an athlete, but I was in business. And
Mhm.
so I thought initially it was the muscles. And when I started to talk with people as I was doing massages, and I would notice that I could feel with my hands when their brain would relax, I could feel their muscles letting go. And I was like, this is unusual. And so by doing that, I then thought, well, let's try it with the stretching. And I would work with the stretching. Now, the stretching that I do, you're only gonna hold for about 5 or 6 seconds at a time, but you're gonna do it 10 times, and so what happens there is that if you hold it longer than that 5 or 6 seconds, your muscles has a stretch reflex that the brain, out of fear, will kick in and contract your muscle.
Mm.
By repeating it 10 times, you're letting your brain see that you didn't die from this. You didn't tear anything. Nothing's damaged, okay? And so the brain then feels safe. And then once the brain feels safe, you can do whatever you want. So, like what I said to my clients, if you know that you can do a split and somebody says, hey, Samantha's coming to the party and she's going to do a split for us for entertainment, you would think nothing of it. But if you can't do a split, your brain would go into anxiety
Yeah.
attacks, okay? Because you think about all the muscles you're gonna tear. And so that's the premise behind that is that once you start to open the muscles up, now the brain sees it's safe and it lets you go from there.
Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is wanting to further develop a reciprocal trust between my brain and my body. I want to be able
Yes.
to trust that my body can handle any situation. Like,
Yeah.
say I have to climb rocks to get out of a situation. I want to be able to
Yeah.
trust and have that connection between my body and
Mhm.
my mind and that feeling of safety that I believe that I can, do whatever is needed in the moment. So that is incredibly interesting, and I wonder what you have to say about that.
So it is a trust thing because again, the reason that you get that 5 or 6 second hold and you're doing it multiple times, when you start to stretch a muscle, you take that muscle up using like a yoga strap and you take that muscle up and you take it to where you first feel the tension. if you try to pull through that tension when you first feel it, the brain goes on high alert that you could tear something. You could hurt yourself.
Oh,
Okay. So that's part of building that trust with the brain to know that you're not going to try to force it because most of our lives we were taught that you're lengthening muscles. So you're going to pull it like taffy to make this muscle let go because we think the muscle's fighting with us. And in reality,
totally.
what's happening is the brain is saying to you, you know, you could tear something here, so we want to be careful. And so it's up to us to listen to that brain. And then once the brain goes, "Hey, he's listening to me now. We're okay. We can do that." And then
That
that
is,
allows the
yeah.
muscle. And so what's funny about it is a lot of times I'll have like a husband come in with his wife or vice versa, and one is sitting in a chair watching what I'm doing, and they're blown away that in minutes, like a hamstring stretch for us, they've increased their range of motion by 6 or 7 inches. And there's a secret to that, we'll talk about that, but that is the thing that just blows so the person sitting in the chair is getting blown away by this. It's like,
Yeah.
I've never seen his leg move like that, you know? And so it's an interesting thing.
It is interesting, and I think about your sports background and everything like that. All of these things that we've developed that trust in our bodies with, we
Yeah,
practiced
right.
over and over and over until it wasn't scary, until we knew our bodies could handle it.
Right.
And so absolutely, why are we going all in on the first stretch, trying to push
Yeah,
harder than we know we can? So
yeah.
that's brilliant, and it seems silly that we didn't think of that before.
Well, and it's been really weird because it's like, like I said, I got into this at 40, so I got into it sort of late in the game from a lot of people. But as I started talking about what I was seeing and finding with doctors, with therapists, I've never had one to say to me, "You're out of your mind." They're usually what I get back from these guys is, "Why don't they teach this in medical school?" Why not
Yeah.
so I went back to school in 2015 to 2018 to get a degree in aging sciences. How do we age from 30 to death?
Mhm.
And I went back, and so we got into the muscle anatomy class, and they were, like, spending, like, almost no time. You got, like, a whole like, a one-hour session on all your muscles, and so one of my professors had a shoulder injury, and we were talking, and I explained to her what I was doing, and so I said, "Let me take a look if you don't mind." She goes, "Yeah, sure, if you can solve it, that'd be great." Well, I got her shoulder to stop hurting, but I was explaining to her what I'm explaining to you, what I'm seeing and what I'm finding and so forth, and she said to me, "I've been teaching anatomy for years. I've never heard anybody say that." And I'm like, "How strange is that?" It's like all this brain power and all this knowledge. It's like, how is it that no one else is talking about that? So she asked me if I'd write a paper on it. And I said, "Yeah, sure." She said, "Let's use some peer reviewed studies and I'll help you with that." We dug through peer reviewed studies. 95% of peer reviewed studies are on strength training because you can measure it. It's easy to measure.
Uh,
The other 5% or so is from yoga. And with yoga, they talk about the mind-body experience, and American yoga typically is very different from what you might see in India or other countries, because in India, it's about the mind. And when I started talking to a friend of mine who was an Indian yogi, when I started talking, it's about the mind, because he would say to me, "You notice that when I make any movements, it's without effort." My mind has no fear of me making that movement. And he said what people are doing in a lot of classes is that they're more about getting into a pose. And in some cases, he said it's egoic where they get into the
yeah.
pose. Let me show you what I could do versus you're relaxing the mind to relax the body. And that just solidified it for me at that point.
That is completely relevant to what I have experienced. I mean, of course, there are some teachers that are different than others, but
Yep.
very much so, the intention is more on being able to form the poses and being able to develop your skills in that
Right.
sense, not
Right.
the being able to let go and trust your body to do those things without getting injured or things of that nature.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting. And
Yeah.
so when you've been learning along the way, the incredible influence that the mind has on pain, and you've worked with patients with chronic pain and fibromyalgia, like you
Mhm.
said. How much of that chronic pain do you think is emotional memory stored in the nervous system versus the actual inherent pain signal that, you know, a threat would give?
The thing is that you have the initial, what they call the acute time of pain, where you initially hurt yourself or initially starts to hurt. As you go through that loop, the brain then starts to look for that pain. In other words, if you have low back pain every time you stand up and you're sitting in a chair for a while, when you have
Mm,
to stand up, your brain's first thought is, uh-oh, I got to stand up. This is going to hurt. And so what
mm,
happens there is that the brain then contracts muscles around that, and you'll watch people get up really slow out of a chair, and then as they do that, that's their brain cautiously letting them come up. And so you're contracting muscles here that can allow that to hang on. So every time they have to get out of bed, every time they have to get up out of a chair, every time they get out of their car, they would start to look for that. I mean, even in my own experience, when my back pain was so bad, I would get out of my car, putting my hands on the pavement and walk out on my hands to get out of my car to try to avoid the pain. And so
oh,
your brain then shifts how you walk, it shifts how you stand, and then that can make the problem even worse.
absolutely. And we see that every
Yeah.
day in ourselves and in
Yeah.
others. And not
Uh-huh.
only physical pain is what we're avoiding, but emotional pain. I
Yeah.
the amount of people that are so afraid to be alone with their own thoughts because they're afraid of the feelings that they'll cause.
Yeah.
All of those
Yeah.
things, it's kind of a lesson that we're meant to feel the pain and just be with it and be
Yeah.
gentle with it instead of trying to push it
Yeah.
away or, reject it. So in that sense, how do you develop your mindset? Like, say I wanted to go for a run right now, and I haven't ran in a while. I used to run cross country, but the last few times I ran, it was, a pretty big shock to the system, the knees, the hips,
Yeah.
the back,
Yeah.
So how would you mentally, like, what would be your mantras going into that and during it to
Yeah.
differentiate between the fear pain and the actual pain?
Right. So to begin with, I mean, if you haven't run in a while, obviously you don't pick up where you left off because you got to build back up to that. That's the first thing you want to do. And then you want to listen to your body. It's like as you're running, you're focusing on what you're doing and you want to listen to the body. When you feel something that's not quite right or doesn't feel quite right, that's when you want to like slow down or stop and then pick it back up the next day. What I would say to a lot of people, especially when it comes into running, understand what muscles you're gonna use the most. As a runner, you're gonna use your feet, your calves, you're gonna use your quads on the front of your thighs, your hamstrings, and so you wanna open those up so that those muscles then can start to flow. For most runners, what I find, especially when they deal with knee pain and ankle pain or foot pain, a lot of times the shoes play a major role with that. When
Mm,
they run, they're running heel to toe just like they walk, which comes from the shoes. So it's understanding not only the mindset and the mental side of it, but it's also understanding the mechanics and the physical side of that running. So when we talk about stretching the calves, most people they'll lean against a wall, they'll drop their heel off of a step or a curve, or they'll stand on a slant board and they think they've stretched their calves. They really didn't stretch their Achilles tendon. Your calf
mm.
muscles, you've got 4 major calf muscles there that control that foot vertically, laterally, and rotationally. When you're into doing that type of stretching and you realize that those muscles are now free, now when you run, you'll run with a lot less fear of hurting yourself because you understand how the muscles are working. And so part of my thing when I'm teaching my clients, whether it's online or in person, is I'm literally teaching them about their muscles. Not that they try to get into the medical terms and all the technical stuff, but understanding how your body works for the sport
Totally.
you want to play. Okay. So a person running is gonna have different injuries than a cyclist. They're gonna have different injuries from a swimmer in a lot of cases, and so depending on the sport that person wants to go into, you wanna educate them on what muscles they're using and how to solve that, and by doing that, now you set the brain free to allow them to do the movements they wanna do without fear of injury.
Yeah, I mean, a large majority of the thoughts that I have when doing especially new exercises or when trying to move up, in weight on a certain movement, things like that, is the fear of injury. And
Yeah,
it's not even any injuries occurring, it is the fear of the injury that's painful, to
yeah.
just sit in.
Yeah, yeah,
So and I love what you were saying about the getting to know your muscles and how they were meant to be used because
right.
I think a lot about our evolutionary biology and our bone structure and how we were meant to live and use our bodies versus how societally we have evolved much faster than our bodies, and we're now sedentary when we're supposed to be, in
Yeah.
pretty constant movement and all of these things. And I think to myself, there are so many people that can't sleep, and it's because our bodies are meant to be used, and we're just sitting
Yes.
all day. Like, how can
That's
you,
right.
if you don't expend the energy, what are you gonna do? So,
Ex
as far as the
yeah.
evolutionary biology goes, what are some things in your mind that you think people do today that go against our biology and what we should do instead?
Man, we could talk for days about that.
I know.
So the first thing that goes against our evolutionary biology is our shoes. The shoe itself, and out of Harvard, I'm trying to think of the doctor's name again. Anyway, Lieberman, Dr. Dan Lieberman, he's actually done several studies on the foot with shoes. And one thing that he found was that shoes that have a built-up heel to them, whether it's a high heel or even a sneaker with a thicker sole, will force a person to run or walk heel to toe. So what happens from a biology standpoint, your foot, each foot has 33 joints in it with 29 bones and 26 muscles. And so what happens there is you're supposed to step on the whole foot so that you can use the arch of the foot to protect the knee, to protect the hip as you're moving, but you propel yourself from the toes. When you wear a thicker sole shoe, what that does is that prevents the ankle from bending the way it's supposed to bend. In fact, if you watch most people walk, young or old, they never bend their ankles. And what you'll
Mm,
notice is they'll lead with their nose every time, which puts stress on the spine of the body. We were not we were not designed evolutionary to wear those kind of shoes. And so when you look at the shoe, you have to look at the shape of the shoe and see if it fits the shape of my foot. You see high heels or cowboy boots with pointy toes on them. Whose foot is shaped like that? Nobody's. And if you look at a sneaker that has a tapered toe box, nobody's foot is shaped like that. So what it does is it forces us to walk differently than we were designed to do that. Now, what's interesting is I have clients that are in Kenya and Colombia and Chile, and when I'm talking to them about their running and so forth, and they've come to the United States, we hear about plantar fasciitis a lot. We hear about
yeah.
arch pain a lot. Okay. They never heard of plantar fasciitis and they run hundreds of miles. They never heard of that, but they run barefoot.
Wow.
Okay. And so when I say this to people, they're just like almost their mind explodes. But it's like your foot was designed to do that. So when you look at things like bunions, bunions are caused by pointier toe shoes because if you watch a person walk, it forces the foot to turn out. However, you're twisting the knee, you're twisting the hip. So every time you're walking, you're adding to it. The movement becomes important. We should not be sitting and living in a sedentary lifestyle. Every time you move, you are lubricating your joints with something called synovial fluid, which is like a WD-40. So the movement, we were never designed to sit. We were designed to move all the time. That synovial fluid also lubricates the disc in your back and your spine. So when you sit for long periods of time, number one, the muscles atrophy. And after you pass the age of 40, you start to lose about 1% of your muscle mass every year. So the muscles atrophy, the joints and the discs dry out. That creates an arthritic type of condition for most people, which creates more pain. Now their brain is afraid of moving at all. So the brain
Yeah.
then slows that down. And then you wonder why you have digestive issues. You're crunching your intestines, you're crunching your whole digestive system by sitting there all day long. I always tease my clients. I say to them, the recliner is the death of old men. They just want to sit in recliners all day long. You gotta get out of the recliner, man. It's like, come on. As you watch people age, they age badly because from an evolutionary standpoint, we've gotten totally away from keeping our bodies active, keeping our muscles active. We've taken on this thing of as we get older, I'm like 65, and people think once you pass 55, 60 years old, you shouldn't have to work out or do things. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're like an antique car. You got to tinker with it every day. The older we get, the more training we need to be doing, taking in more protein and actually building our muscle strength so that we can keep our bones strong, keep our mobility there. And then the stretching that I teach people allows them to keep their flexibility so they can reduce their pain. You can do this with 80 and
Absolutely.
90-year-old people. I do it every day, 80 and 90-year-old people. So it's like you got to move. There is no other way around it.
100%. Whenever I hear somebody talking about that, I'm like, "Use it or lose it. I don't want you to lose
Absolutely.
it, so please use it." It's
Yes.
scary, especially if you're at that age and you haven't been your whole life and you're starting something
Yeah.
new, and it can be intimidating in so many ways,
Yeah.
but I tell my mom all the time, I'm like, "You need to start lifting, I need your bone density to be fine,
Yeah.
like, let's keep
Yeah.
you healthy," and I was
Yeah.
reading a textbook, a health psychology textbook, and it said the closest thing that we have to a fountain of youth is exercise.
Yes.
Of course,
Exercise
diet is very
and food.
important.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course,
Yes.
diet, but
Yeah.
it just really painted a picture of if you're using your body correctly, it will
Yep.
treat you right,
That is
and that's
exactly right.
amazing.
I mean, it's
So
like I always say to my young athletes, I was like, you're a young athlete. You're on your way to college scholarships. You've got a Ferrari for a body at this point. Why would you put water in a gas tank? And they
mm,
look at me really funny, and I said, "Would you do that?" And they go, "Well, no, I would never do that to a Ferrari," but you're doing it to your body. "Well, what should I eat?" I said, "If you pick up a package of carrots, the ingredients should say carrots,
yeah,
not 14 other things that made it up, okay?" And it's like and they wanna make it sound hard, but it's not really hard. So, the food you eat, not only does it reduce inflammation when you eat good food, it creates the necessary minerals and vitamins that you need in your body on a cellular level to keep your body healthy. And then when you throw in the exercise where you're building your muscle mass, it allows you to have the energy, it allows you to have the strength to get up and move and do things, and then when you have the flexibility, you're protecting your joints. So I always say to people, think of it this way. Think of strength training as putting gasoline in your car for power, and then think of stretching as putting oil in the engine for lubrication.
mm,
Which one do you want me to leave out? And they look at me really funny because they'll always say, should I do strength training or stretching? And I'll always give them that. And I go, which one do you leave out? And they go, well, neither. The car will die. And I go, so will you.
and you gotta run it.
It's
You gotta
insane.
run the car, you can't let it sit in the
Yes,
garage.
yes, no, you can't let it sit in the garage, no, and it's the funniest thing, but it's like, people just don't know, and we have spent decades not teaching people how to take care of their bodies, and that's a shame.
I could not agree more, and that's why I
Yeah,
started all of this. So, thank you for being here to give your wisdom. I think about, how your relationship with pain must have changed over the years.
yes, yeah,
Could you tell me a little bit more about your inner dialogue of the version of you that was crawling out of the car to the version of you today that might feel an ache
yeah,
or pain every once in a while?
yeah, absolutely, it was like, when I was back crawling out of my car on my hands, I was almost at a hopeless state because I was thinking to myself, "My gosh, I'm 40 years old. If this is gonna be my life, I just soon let it go now." And, I would look at things and go, "Oh, my is I have a bad back. I have a bad back. I
Mm,
can't do so and so." And I started limiting my life. I started limiting my movement. And what I realized was that I didn't have a bad back. My back did hurt, but I didn't have a bad back. What I had was tight quads on the front of my legs, tight hip flexors, and my hips were tight. And once I loosened those up and then got into loosening up my calves and my hamstrings, I realized I never had a bad back. What I had was tight leg muscles. And those tight leg muscles were tilting my pelvis forward. And as they did that, it increased the curve in the small of my back, causing the pain. Now, the sad part is that we're trained in school that you treat the site of the pain, which would be the
yeah.
symptom. Okay. And so the thing is that if you don't understand the cause, and one of the neurosurgeons who was my mentors, she said it really cool. She said, as a neurosurgeon, I look at a scan of somebody's spine, I'm looking for something that I know how to fix. But she said, "You know what question they never ask?" And I said, "What's that?" "What caused it to happen?" It didn't just happen out of bad luck. It was
Oh,
it was something you did, a postural thing you did, or a muscle that's pulling something out of whack, and then that cascaded into an issue with a disc, whether it's a bulging disc, a herniated disc, or a pinched nerve. And the thing is that you have to ask the question, what caused that to happen? Because if you don't, you're just going to go back for repeated surgeries because it just keeps moving up the spine because you haven't changed anything. And so for me, the mindset shifted from what caused this to happen and understand that the site of pain is not the cause of pain. And when I
mm,
started figuring that out, 25 years later, I wake up with no pain,
that's
and I can do whatever
incredible.
I can do whatever I want. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love that. That freedom to say to
yeah,
even just say, "I can do whatever I want," is
yeah,
so powerful and something that I don't think very many people have. I even
mm-mm,
with my own chronic pain struggles, my body was always capable of doing things, but I would
yeah,
always hold myself back because I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to complete a task or,
yep,
that I would hold other people back if I went on a trip or whatever. And by pushing myself to do those things and at the end of every day realizing that I did it even if I was in pain was the biggest change maker for me because
yeah,
it allowed me to form that trust.
yep,
And I mean, as long as she's operating, I'm very grateful, and the pain is a message, right? I'm trying to
yeah,
ref help people reframe pain as a communication from
yeah,
their body
yeah.
that's benevolent, that is trying to help, not
Yep.
a punishment for treating your body poorly over the
Right,
years.
right, exactly. Yeah, it's not your bad luck. It's not your no, it's not having
Yeah.
to do with bad luck. It is really it is your body saying to your brain, "We have a problem here that could get worse." It's up to you to take that knowledge and not just sit back and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm so unlucky." That's a sign that says I need to do something. And even if you go to a doctor and they give you something for pain, just because the pain left doesn't mean that it stopped the problem. And it
Mhm.
you got more to do. And I've said to people, I mean, I'm not a purist. I said to people this that sometimes the pain can be so sharp that it takes your breath away. If you need to take something to slow that down, that's fine. But understand you have worked the end of pain, just because you don't feel it doesn't mean it's not there.
Okay, so to those people that are in the midst of that pain that kind of takes away from everything else, and they don't have
Yeah,
that trust in their bodies,
yeah.
I'm sure you would advise them to start slowly, right, and
Mhm.
develop kind of a routine around those things. How it's very hard for people psychologically to stick with something if they don't see immediate results, right? It's a
Yes,
lot easier
yes,
if you're getting immediate
yes.
gratification. So what do you say? What do
So for me, it's like when somebody comes to see me here in my office or I'm working with them online, what I'm looking for is what are one or two things they can do that's going to give them the most results. So we really want to focus on where do they feel their pain. So I'll give you an example. There's a young woman I worked on today, and she had had like hip pain and had been with her for quite a while. And so I showed her three or four things she could do over the two sessions that we had. And she would come back and said, I just came back off a trip. My hip pain was down 90%.
Whew,
Once you get to that point, now they're excited because you're starting to put hope back into their lives that maybe I can get through this. And now all of a sudden it becomes something that you want to do. So one of the biggest misconceptions on stretching is that people believe that you only do it when you feel stiff or something hurts. And really and truly, Mother Nature can teach us about this. Watch a dog, a cat, or a bird. Every day, they will stretch several times a day before they take off.
totally.
And so, as humans, we have to do the same thing. Because remember, every thought we have, every state of mind that we get into, everything we do is tightening the muscles all day and all night. Because even if you're dreaming, you're going to tighten your muscles. And it's understanding that this is part of life. Think of it more in terms of eating. We eat every day, two or three times a day, because we don't want to be hungry. So, stretching then becomes like eating so we don't have to have pain. But that doesn't mean you have to stretch every single muscle in your body and spend hours doing it every day. Typically, what I do is I'll stretch whatever, I'll look at my body. What did I do yesterday or the last 12 hours? And I'll do two or three, maybe four stretches first thing in the morning and the last thing before I go to bed at night. And by doing that, number one, at first thing in the morning, it starts my day off where I feel free as a bird. And when I go to bed at night, because I've stretched my body out with three or four stretches, my body is more relaxed. And when I go to bed and I sleep soundly. So the idea is that understanding what your body's saying to you is a key thing because for so many people, they get these messages, it's pain, it's cramping, it's this, but they're not able to interpret the message.
Yeah.
And the message and what the message is saying, we got a problem here. But if you don't know what to do with that, they could be speaking to you in Chinese. What difference would it make? You see what I'm
They
saying?
might not even know it's a message.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly right. Yes. Yes. And so that's the thing that when people come to see me and I work with them, let's get that easy win first to start showing you that this is helping you. And then once we can do that, getting you to do it on a regular basis becomes much easier.
Totally. the small wins,
Yeah.
baby steps.
Yeah. Yep.
The parallel to the animals in our households and, daily lives.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So true. I have a mental image of my dog stretching before she lays down, as she
Yeah.
gets up, you know? Um,
Yeah.
but I'm curious because there has been quite a debate over the years in
Yeah.
scientific research, whether it's better to stretch before exercise or after exercise or morning and night,
Yeah.
not around your exercise. So evolutionarily, what do you say about that?
I always laugh when I hear those debates. You don't have to stretch before or after. If you stretch first thing in the morning, last thing of the day, you're gonna solve that problem, number 1, because your body's gonna be free, it's gonna be flexible. What most of them were talking about, and I just read an article where there was a doctor in North Carolina who wrote an article saying that stretching didn't really work. Stretching, you didn't really need to do that for the human body. And my wife read it. At first, she got a little upset about it, and I said, "Well, read it to me. Tell me what it says." I said, she's reading me the article. I said, "You realize everything he's saying is true, but what he's talking about is the traditional static stretching because there's been studies out that have shown with traditional static stretching, which is like you're pulling taffy, you're trying to lengthen these muscles. What they found with athletes is that if they do that prior to their performance, because the muscles fatigue out, that diminishes their performance on the field or court. Okay. So
Mhm.
what most people are talking about when they talk about stretching or think about stretching is they're thinking about that static stretching. Now, the other part of the static stretching is that you're trying to stretch groups of muscles at one time, which is a big problem. An
Mm.
example, like I gave with the calves, you've got 4 calf muscles. So you've got to really be able to get in and out of those 4 calf muscles so the feet open up, but you have 3 hamstrings. And so when you watch people stretch their hamstrings at a gym, they're typically laying flat and they reach down and they grab their leg and they're pulling their leg as hard as they can. They're doing a bicep curl. They're not stretching anything. They're doing a bicep curl. So if you do it the way that static stretching people are doing it, it's not really going to help you a lot. Now, there's a few exceptions. Dynamic stretching is if you're going to do that before any working out would be fine because what you're doing there is you're getting warm blood into the tissue. Now,
Uh,
dynamic stretching, you'll see people sort of skipping along or they're doing different types of movement. And what you're doing there is you're forcing warm blood into the muscle tissue, making that tissue more pliable, which reduces your risk of injury when you work out. Okay.
mhm.
I don't see a whole lot of need of doing static stretching, to be honest with you. That's where most people get hurt. And that's a lot of times, like you go to the doctor and you go, well, what about stretching? The doctor's going, oh, no, no, don't do that. Because what he's thinking about is the static stretching and he can see somebody tearing something as they're trying to pull
Yeah.
too hard. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
it's a nice little snap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when these different articles and studies that you read, what they're basically talking about is static stretching.
What you were I don't know how much you know about yoga, but what you were saying, I think about yin yoga, how that's more like holding positions for a long time
Yeah,
versus, say, like a vinyasa yoga where you're kind of consistently in movement, you're not holding
right.
things for too long. And I completely have to acknowledge that I avoid yin yoga at all costs
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
scary to like
yeah,
fight with your brain and to feel like you can hold those positions for so long.
yeah, yeah.
And maybe it's just a more brute force way of getting your body and mind to trust each other, but
It is.
I think there's a lot to be said about when we're healing ourselves mentally, physically,
Yeah,
emotionally, about gentleness, about
yes,
not forcing things,
right,
and non-resistance because what you resist, you're causing to persist by virtue of accidentally focusing on it by trying to get
right.
rid of it, right?
Exactly
So
right. That's exactly right, and it's like so I always say to people when they're into yoga, the same thing I used to say to people years ago when I was a trainer, "What are you training for?" And it's like, so if you're 40, 45, 50 years old and you're wanting to get into yoga, well, you wouldn't go to the gym training with weights like an Olympic athlete would train because you're not going to be in the Olympics. And so if you go into yoga and your idea is I'm going to use brute force, I'm going to teach my muscles how to let go, I'm going to make my mind do so and so, you will fail and you will fail miserably because what happens there is that because you're trying to use brute force and force it, you're fighting with your mind. Now, if you understand that, okay, I want to hold this pose, yeah, somebody who's been doing it for years might be able to hold that pose for half an hour, but you're not going to start out there. And so, what you really have to focus on in that pose is I've got to now play with my mind. And that's part of that mind body connection they talk about in yoga. Once the mind is there, now you can start to hold that a little bit longer. But keep in mind, that is strength training. That is not stretching. And a lot of people seem to think that's stretching. That's not stretching. That's strength training because you're holding that pose. And what
Uh-huh.
you're doing is you're using your mind to improve your stamina. You're not fighting with your muscles. What you're fighting with is your mind. And learning how to control that mind is the key to doing a lot of that. But I'm with you. It's like when you're doing things like that, you want to be gentle with your body so that the mind is not fighting with you. The muscles don't have the ability to decide. I've heard people come in and go, it's like my muscles in my hips don't want to let go. Then they don't have that ability. They'd have to have a brain in all your muscles. And you don't have 653 brains in your body. You have one. And that's the
Yeah,
only
I
one
think
you're fighting
inherently
with.
they want to let go. The brain's
They
not
do.
letting them. Yeah,
It's just
naturally.
it's just reactive tissue is all it is. And so it reacts to the brain. And the reason why it does that, and it's important, you've heard of fight or flight response. Well, if you're in a building that's on fire and your brain goes, oh my gosh, Samantha, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And your legs are like, yeah, I don't want to leave today. You'd be messed up. Right. So the brain has to have 100% control of the muscles. The muscles can't decide anything. It's just reactive tissue, is all it is.
I'm curious what you have to say about because I know in some yogic belief systems that emotions, they say, can be stored in the fascia. Have you
Yes.
ever experienced like, I've talked to people that say they
Yes.
did, like, a hip stretch and started crying over
Yes.
something. Have you
Yes.
experienced that in your practice?
Yes. I've had men and women that literally you start opening up their body, especially if they've dealt with some loss of a loved one or
Mm.
any number of things where they'd literally stop and curl up like a baby and cry on the massage table. Yeah, yeah. Because the thing is that everything in your life from the day you were born until today is stored in the fascia, which is the fascia is material that actually holds the organs in place, but it also wraps around the muscles as well. And so what happens on an emotional basis when you have a loss, even if you fell off your bike at 5, okay? Until you release those things, your body will hold on to it, and it holds on to it in a way that you hurt your leg or let's say you jump off the side of a building and you hurt your leg or whatever, and you go, he's always had a limp ever since then. Well, what's happening there is that the brain is still picturing that pain from your leg at 5 or 6 years old, and all it did was continue to have you to walk with a limp or to have a certain twist in your body or whatever, just not to revisit that pain. And so until you get there and you let that go, that's just gonna stay with your body.
Absolutely, and you can only imagine if you've never let go, how much has built up with time,
Yeah.
and you have to
Yeah.
give yourself grace, you did the best you could
Yeah.
with the knowledge that you had, now you know that you can release it, so let's move toward that.
Yeah.
So, what does the practice look like for somebody doing it on themselves? If somebody
So
in
to
pain wanted a technique to
Yeah.
start today?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a few things. Some things you can do with your hands, and I usually give someone a yoga strap, or if you're going to do something online, I have them buy like a yoga strap or a piece of rope that's about 6 or 8 feet long. And so what you're doing there, let's say for instance a calf stretch. Typically, I have them to set either they can get on the floor, set on the floor with their hips and back against the wall so that their body is 90 degrees to their leg. You
Mm,
take the yoga strap, you put it around the ball of your foot, and what you're going to do is you're gonna gently pull the toes back towards you, but the focus is I wanna feel the muscles in the back of my calves up behind my knees starting to let go. And because you feel a little bit of tension is not okay for you to just pull your foot as hard as you can. Because what I normally see with people when they first start is one lady came into the day and had showed her how to do it. So she went home and she came back and I said, all right, let me see what you're doing with your calf stretches. She was sitting there on the floor. She literally pulled her foot up 2 feet up off the floor. And I laughed and she goes, what? And I go, well, your biceps are going to look great, but your calf is not stretching out. She was using the weight of her leg. So what you wanna do there is you put that yoga strap around the ball of your foot, and you gently pull the toes back as the whole leg is laying resting, like, dead on the floor, and
mhm,
and you can also if you can't get on the floor, you can do this in a hard back chair with an ottoman, but what you're doing is as you pull that back, you're breathing out to allow that to release and let go. Hold it for about 5 seconds, and then you're gonna repeat that 10 times. Well, like I said earlier, there's 4 muscles in the calf. So you're gonna rotate after 10 times, rotate the leg inward. Now when you pull that toe forward, instead of feeling it in the middle of the calf behind the knee, you're gonna feel it more to the outside of the calf, up by the knee, okay? Because the calf muscles are attaching above the knee. And you'll do that 10 times again. So as you're pulling back, you're breathing out to release the pressure in your body as you pull back. Then when you're done with that, roll the leg to the outside, and now when you pull the toes, you'll feel the inside calf muscle do that as well. The importance of that, which is probably the most important stretch you can do on the human body, is that that's going to allow the foot, the ankle to bend vertically like it's supposed to, but it's also going to allow the ankle to bend laterally for better balance and rotationally. A quick little thing is that with golfers that come in to see me with low back pain, I would say 9 out of 10 times what you're gonna find is that their calves and their hamstrings are tight, so they're trying to rotate on the golf ball using their upper body and a little bit of their hips.
Huh.
Once you unlock the calves and the hamstrings, the back pain goes away.
Wow. It's
Yeah,
a lot to think about. I feel like calves virtually get very ignored. I mean, even when I'm doing
they
strength
do,
training,
yes.
I'm like, "Oh, my calves are getting it somehow." You know, they're getting it through
Yeah,
the squats and
yeah,
whatever. That's really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
really like
so the
sneaky MVPs.
they really are. So it's like the foundation of your body. So you have 2 bones there with muscles in between, and then you have the shin muscles on the front that come from underneath the kneecap down out to your toes. So that is controlling so much of your body. And when the ankles won't bend, when you walk, you will lead with your nose to get momentum to move forward.
And I know that connecting to nature is also something evolutionarily we were meant to do with
Yes.
grounding
Yes.
and, actually
Yeah.
touching the earth. So,
Yes.
for those that might not be in their daily life able to logically go without shoes in their office jobs and whatnot,
Right.
um,
Right.
what do you recommend? Do you recommend getting those shoes that, have a wide toe box to allow the flexibility and
Yes.
perhaps have, like, conducting material? Do you think those work?
So not so much with the conducting material. I mean, that's okay if you really want to go that way, but I would say the minimalist shoes that really allow the muscles in your feet to work, and there's any number of them out there. I wear shoes called Zero shoes, Xero. You get them online, but what I like about it is there's no support, there's no cushion there. So what it does is it allows you to walk like you would barefoot indoors or anywhere you wanna be. I've used them for hiking, I've used them for all kinds of things. I would say if you can find a grassy spot, whether it's at a park, whether it's in your backyard, wherever it is, and I've got a spot in my backyard that I walk on all the time, take your shoes up, feel the ground. It's not a terrible thing. I mean, some people think this is going barefoot is a horrible thing because they've been told never walk barefoot on any surface because you could hurt your feet. And the truth of the matter is that the surface is not hurting your feet. What's hurting your feet is your muscles have atrophied because you've worn shoes with arch supports and heel supports and thick soles. They don't even know how to work because you put them in a cast for decades, and that's why their feet hurt when they walk. I
Well,
walk on
I
tile floors barefoot every night.
yeah, and I wanna get to that point. For a long time, I was wearing shoes in the house because I had such bad foot pain, but it was because of the shoes. So,
Yes.
it's a perpetuating cycle.
Yeah.
But I'm so curious because evolutionarily, we evolved alongside natural ground.
Yeah.
Grass, maybe, like, some stone erosion type stuff, but not cement.
Right.
So, what say you about walking barefoot on surfaces that are unnaturally hard?
It won't it's not gonna hurt your foot from a physical standpoint. You're not gonna get the magnetism from the earth.
Mhm,
You're not gonna get that connection to the earth itself,
mhm.
like you would if you're walking on grass or you're walking on dirt or you're walking on any natural material. And it's like, so you wanna put grounding into your life because you are a part of this whole earth thing. You're a part of that, and it's like, by doing that grounding like that, it's gonna help you not only how you feel,
Mhm.
but it's also gonna help you physically because our bodies need that. The touching of the grass on the bottom of your foot it's just weird to hear people talk about that they've never felt that. And it's like, that's
Yeah.
really weird. And it's like, you gotta do it. You gotta do it.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I didn't get to ask about that was kind of mind-blowing was that you said you're not supposed to walk heel to toe. I feel like
Right.
I was taught specifically
Yeah.
to walk and run heel to toe because that was the
Yes.
safest, best way to do it.
You were. You
So
were. Yes. We were all taught that. Yeah.
so why was that so heavily misunderstood then?
So the shoes had a lot to do with it. Having heels and stuff on shoes, even a 1-inch heel like on a men's shoe, has a lot to do with that. So the thing is when you look at the design of the foot, the arch on the foot is like a spring, and it's supposed to absorb the impact of your foot hitting the ground, which means you need to have good muscle tone in your feet to make that happen. When I teach people about walking, I say to them, think about an ice skater. They push off and then they catch themselves with their front foot. Then they push off and they catch themselves with their other foot. And so when you're walking, you're not going to go zigzag like an ice skater would, but you're going to walk straight. But what you want to be able to do is you want to push off with the back foot,
Mm.
feel your toes propelling you forward. What happens there versus walking heel to toe is that as you push off with your toes, your whole body stays straight. Whereas when you go heel to toe, watch most people walk, especially if they're in a hurry, they're walking like they're walking into a headwind. Well, that puts pressure on your neck and down between your shoulder blades because you got to hold this bowling ball that's on top of your shoulders called your head, and that puts a lot of pressure down the spine. So when you push off with that back foot, pushing off with your toes, you're catching yourself with that front foot. Now you're stepping on the whole foot. That allows, number 1, the arch to flex, the toes to widen for better balance, and then you push yourself off with that foot, but you're building the strength back into the foot itself. Most people, their foot strength is just horrible because they've been in shoes all the time. I don't
Yeah,
know I
and
don't
then
know
of
who
course
started that, but it seems crazy.
but we can't expect ourselves to immediately feel comfortable walking. It's one of those things that you have to practice.
Yeah.
You know, if your
Yeah.
muscles aren't developed,
Yeah.
maybe don't start running right away.
That's
Maybe
right.
develop the
That's
walking
right.
muscles and all of that first, which is a note to self.
Exactly right.
Because I tend to go all in. Um, so so you talked a little bit about how we can do the self-stretching for muscle
Yeah.
release, but you also incorporate massage into your practice.
Yes.
You do self-massaging, like, during the stretching?
I do. I do. Actually, I do. It's like and I teach people how to do it to themselves as well. Everybody kind of thinks that a massage therapist has magical hands. We really don't. Unfortunately, in massage therapy, we don't really teach people a lot about muscles in a way you can teach other people. So you feel your leg. For most people, the only legs they really feel are usually their own. So whatever your
Mhm,
leg feels like, it could be hard as a rock or it could be soft as a pillow. That's normal. Okay.
that's true.
And so people don't really know what a good normal is. And so one of the things that I teach them is when I touch somebody, let's say your leg, and I hit spots that feel hard, I know that if I press hard, you're going to feel a lot of pain. One. Number two, I want people to understand that when they press their leg, they're not going to feel it as hard. They're going to feel it as sore. So what you're doing is you're
Mm.
methodically, point by point, touching your leg, looking for sore spots. And when you find one, you stay there, maintain the pressure. Now, the temptation of everybody is they want to dig in really deep because everybody's talking about deep tissue massage. We're going to dig in really deep and we're going to force this thing out because we want to just brutally force everything to do what we want it to do. That's a bad thing. You're just going to fail. So what you do is you maintain that pressure, but then you use the breath and relax the mind. And what you'll feel under your thumb or your hand is a muscle literally just letting go. Just
So
that
it's more
simple.
of like a holding pressure rather than like a rubbing
More of like a
action?
Yep, yep, and it's not a deep pressure at all. It's like, a lot of times my friends who are massage therapists, they'll say to me, if I do 3 or 4 people a day, I'm, like, exhausted. And they're like, "So how many people do you do a day?" And I said, "In the wintertime, I'll do 8 to 10 in a day's time." And they're like, "Oh my god, I'd be dead." But the problem is that from the therapist standpoint, they're overworking because they have a mindset that they can make your muscles release. That's a
Mm.
lie. They can't do that. You have to let go. So many times the teachers in a massage therapy school are retired deep tissue massage therapists who've damaged their thumbs because they've been fighting with clients' brains the whole time, and nobody ever told them.
Wow, well
Yeah,
said. I
yeah,
am a person that requests deep tissue massages because I think they
yeah,
feel great, but you're
yeah,
right, if your mind's still resisting, you're not going to have the effects that you could.
right.
So that's very, very interesting, and I always tell my massage therapist, I'm like, "I don't know how you do it because my hands." I try to, like, massage my own hand, and then I have to massage this
Yeah,
hand because it's already tired. So so
yeah,
it is amazing, and it's practice,
yeah,
again, to trust your hands to do those things.
yeah.
So
Well, see, reason
that's
reason why that feels good for you is that when they push so deep like that, your brain is fighting with them. Now they're damaging their hands, but the muscle starts to fatigue out. It can only hold for so long. It's like if you take a dumbbell, let's say you take a 25-pound dumbbell, you're only going to hold it out in front of you for so long before the arm's just going to fall. And so the same thing happens there is you push really deep and you keep working and digging in there. The brain is contracting, contracting, contracting. And at some point, the muscle just fatigues out and it feels good for the moment. But
uh,
what you're going to do is you're going to build back more lactic acid. And on top of that, you want to be able to, in other words, how we feel so good when you come out of that massage therapy. What if you could maintain most of that until your next visit to the massage therapy? They don't have to go back to ground zero again and start all over, you see? So it's easier on the therapist,
absolutely.
but you get the benefit of it by doing that. So by teaching people how to do that in between the sessions, they now can maintain most of what we accomplished in the session.
Yeah. Alright. And during the session, maybe would you suggest doing some, like, positive thought, like, focusing on releasing, breathing into the space where they're massaging, things like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the whole time, and the mechanics of the stretch and release technique are very simple. That's always the easy part, and everybody jumps on the mechanics because 'cause they're looking for that one thing that's gonna solve all the problems in my whole life, which is impossible. The mental side of it is the tough part because getting people to be able to let go of their mind and allow their body get back into their bodies and allow their bodies to release and let go, that's the hardest part of the whole thing. Yeah.
Gives us a lot to think about or to not think about, to let go of. Do you have any, like, overarching statement that if you could tell the world how to treat their bodies
Yeah.
better and how to feel better, what would you wanna say?
There's a couple of things. There number 1, understand that you're not fighting with your body. You're fighting with your mind. And once you can understand that your body is just a reactive thing to what your mind, in other words, your body's going to react to the thoughts and the state of mind that you're in. So if you're always angry, your body's always going to be tight. If you're a type A person who's got it, everything's got to be perfect, your body's always going to be tight. If you need to, and there's nothing wrong with having that in short spurts, but what you need is the ability to be able to relax the mind so you can relax the body. And so people talk to me about meditation and they always want to know, how do you clear your mind? And I go, I don't clear my mind. What I do when I'm doing meditation is I realize I'm going to have thoughts because I'm not a monk that's been practicing for all my life. What I do is I take the judgment out of the thought. It's like, did I turn off the light in the living room? Crap, I'm so stupid. I should have turned that light off. That's where the muscles start to tense. So you take
Mm.
the judgment out of that, and now all of a sudden you can keep the body soft. The other thing I would say is I wrote a book about all this. Go to Amazon, get the book, and it's gonna teach you what I'm talking about in this book so that you can
I can't
follow
wait.
that, the stretch and really. Yeah, and I priced it cheap enough low enough so that everybody could afford to get it because I spent 4 years writing this thing, and the point of it is to teach you about the brain's role with your muscles, why most common treatments, fall short or just don't help at all, and then in the back half of the book, I'm taking particular parts like back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, and giving you some things you can do with that you can start to solve those problems on your own and learn about how to do this. On my YouTube channel, I've got over 200 videos where I literally demonstrate a lot of this stuff on there that you can go to and learn. I mean, the comments on my videos, I had a friend who talked me into doing them because I didn't think it would work. I've been amazed. I mean, I got over 4,800 people that subscribe to the channel, and the comments from it is as much fun to read as anything else, just to see how a simple 10 or 15-minute video changed somebody's life. And it just blows me away every time I see it.
Isn't that incredible? That's what
Yeah,
I live
yeah.
for. Just being able
Yes,
to
me too.
help people shift their lives like that. That is really
Yeah,
incredible.
that I mean,
Wow.
that's to me, it's like if I won the lottery, I would just keep doing this for free, but because it's like to see
Exactly.
somebody able to change their own lives and they have control of that, that's what I do this for.
I could not agree more. That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm literally going to order your book right now. I'm very excited and might have to have you back on for more questions if they
Anytime.
arise.
Anytime. Yes, anytime, for sure.
Awesome. I really appreciate you being here and sharing all of your
Thank you.
wisdom with us. I feel like
Thank you.
people have a better direction to go in now. At least we can ask them to be less judgmental toward their bodies and toward themselves. And that
Yeah,
might
yeah.
loosen things up in general. Just be gentle with yourself.
Yes. Love yourself. You have to be in your body, love your body, be kind to it. Understand that the body's not betraying you. Many times it's the thoughts we have in our mind. If we can really create better thoughts, better ideas, and that starts again with learning. And as we can do that and learn how our body works, you don't have to be a physician to be able to do that or a therapist. You can learn enough about your body, how it works, what it takes to make it work right. There's tons of information on the internet. Learn, and be kind to yourself, and your body will be kind back to you.
Beautiful. And we'll end on that gorgeous note. Thank you, Butch.
Thank you. Thank you. You're
Take
welcome.
care.
You too.
Butch, thank you for reminding us that healing isn't about domination of a problem. It is about dialogue with the body. And when we stop fighting our bodies, we finally give them room to breathe and heal. So to our listeners, if you've been living in pain, let this be your turning point. Start where you are. Listen to what your body whispers instead of what your mind demands. Because freedom isn't found in force. It's found in release and peace. You can find Butch's book, Stretch and Release, and his videos at the Muscle Repair Shop on YouTube. And if this episode moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that healing is possible. This is Shine In and Out, where science meets soul. Remember that the body is not our enemy, but our oldest teacher. And until next time, keep shining.